Thank you, everyone. I'm so happy to be with all my fellow Hugo House fellows. It's been a really transformational fellowship for me. I do a lot of writing and I teach a lot of writing, but I don't often write. I don't often work on my own personal writing, oddly. So this has been a chance for me to really work on this novel idea. But still feels sort of like an idea, even though I've been working through this draft. This is something that I've literally just been working on recently, but I think it's the opening scene, or it's going to be the opening scene. And not only, it's called The Last Bookstore, and not only is it inspired by that experience at Borders, but it's also inspired partly by my high school years working at the Indianola Country Store in Delhi in Indianola, Washington, which was really exciting, and I worked there like 30 hours a week, so I spent a lot of my high school years, stocking beer and sleeping and making sandwiches and stuff. So that's, anyway, it's partly inspired by that. Okay, The Last Bookstore. You should also know that this is supposed to be futuristic, and I'm sort of playing around with that, and I'm figuring that out as I go, but it is in the future somewhat. They still called it the beer cooler, even though it wasn't cold and no longer held anything you could drink. Junie's mother had ripped out the plastic lining from the shelves, made to hold individual bottles, and had stuffed them with books, mainly the ones of least interest: bridal makeup guides, child star biographies, and literary journals published by small state universities. Behind these shelves was a dim, musty storage area blocked from view by the books, which kept Junie safe back there. That and the fact that the store had no customers. Junie faintly remembered the days when that space had been refrigerated, a cool cavern stacked with microbrews at the front and 40-ounce cans of Miller High Life and Mickey's behind. It was damp now, with no overhead light. The ceiling sloped towards the ground, and squirrels wrestled behind the walls. But it was private, and though windowless, it faced the open water in the city. Behind boxes of old phone books in the far back corner, Junie had hidden a laptop, a Pendleton blanket, a turquoise desk lamp with a bendy neck, and a stack of candy bars she shoplifted from the grocery store in Fort Wilson. She had to lay on her belly to type, propped up on her elbows, her feet squished against the boxes. It was illegal, but it was hers. If Junie had checked the laptop the day the first bombs shattered in the city, she might have known. But it was raining so hard that morning, she'd had to throw on a parka and pick all the strawberries with her mother before they fell off the vine and rotted. She made it to the store afterward, slipped back to fire up the dinosaur computer she wasn't supposed to have, and went behind the counter to make tea when the bells on the front door burst into an angry jangle. "Juniper, Junie, little Junie bug, are you here?" Junie jerked backward, dropping the kettle onto her foot. She hefted it back onto the glowing burner. Her older sister stood just inside the front door, dripping a puddle of water onto the linoleum. Hazel's braids were unraveling, plastered to the sides of her face. She'd taken to wearing her dark hair in twin braids tied with flowers, along with an odd assemblage of clothing made from scraps of different material. That day it was a dress sewn up from a burlap sack and embroidered with bright, blocky birds. She'd added old army boots, chunky and spattered with dirt, and a headband woven out of tire rubber. A small grin flickered across her face at Junie's appearance. Then she tilted her head back and laughed, her face split by a secret joke. She looked terrible. She looked wonderful. She was definitely high. "Oh, Junebug, of course you would look at me like that," Hazel said, and stopped laughing as quickly as she had started. "Like what?" "Like I just stabbed a baby." "Hazel, God." Junie swallowed against a lump in her throat. It was the same sting she felt every time she saw her sister, the same painful longing tempered by flickers of annoyance. The way that Hazel could just appear like this infuriated her, but she didn't want her to leave either. "You want some tea?" she said. Hazel's eyes flashed. "I had a vision, and it was unbelievable, and it came true," she said. She walked up to the counter, carrying with her the scent of wood smoke and wet earth. Up close, Junie could see the pine needle stuck to her sister's neck and the rain that glittered on her eyelashes. Hazel was shaking her head back and forth slowly. "There's chamomile," Junie said, "and that nettle stuff you like." Hazel reached out, her wet fingers cold on top of Junie's hand. "It's so crazy, it came true." "Cocoa," Junie said. "I shouldn't even be here, but I had to warn you," Hazel said. "The kind with tiny marshmallows," Junie tried again. "Listen," Hazel said. "Seriously, you're freezing." Hazel's voice dropped. "They're after me, I'm trying to tell you." The hair on Junie's arms prickled. The last time Hazel had shown up high, she'd found her spirit animal, and the time before that, she'd slipped into Junie's room in the middle of the night and whispered for hours about her plans to move deeper into the woods, And every time Junie was thrilled by her sister's confidence because Hazel hardly ever spoke to her when she was sober. Her sister wore her intoxication like a fuzzy halo. She could be irritating, intense, or silly, but she was never frightened. The sirens are going off in the city, Hazel said. She leaned further onto her elbows. Don't say anything if anyone asks, and they will ask. A maple leaf fluttered from her scalp to the counter. I don't even know what you're talking about, so how am I supposed to say anything, Junie said. I have to hide, Hazel said. She put the leaf back in her hair. Everyone's going to know. It'll be in the news. We don't get the news. Junie gestured vaguely out at the store, as if to remind Hazel of where they lived. The bookstore occupied what used to be a general store in Delhi and retained its display cases, tall drink fridges, beer cooler, and sandwich bar. The ice machine still read ICE in faded red letters. The floorboard still creaked and sank underfoot, and long fluorescent lights still sputtered in the ceiling. Junie's mother had removed everything else. Gone were the cheese puffs, the jars of pickled chips, the waxy lollipops. Gone were the newspapers, the boxed wine, the packets of napkins. Gone was the fishing tackle, the generic brand shortening, the cigarettes and the ketchup and the sugared peanuts. Everything now was filled with books. They were stacked 2 rows deep, with titles piled horizontally on top of the vertical ones. Junie's mother was indiscriminate in her collection. If it was a physical book, she rescued it. She kept first editions in the glass deli case where the ham and smoked turkey had once resided, proudest of her signed copy of The Waves. Greek tragedies, post-colonial poetry anthologies, westerns, sci-fi, thrillers, some still wearing plastic library dust jackets, elbowed each other to the ends of the shelves. The romance novels lived in the pizza oven. Sheet music, fake books full of jazz standards, test prep manuals, gardening tomes, and collections of travel photography piled together in the bins and boxes that Audra used for overflow. It wasn't particularly cozy or clean. It smelled like something between a wet dog and the cab of an old truck. And her mother kept an ancient boombox growling with feminist punk music that scared Junie a little. It was too dark or too brightly lit, depending on whether the fluorescents were working, and critters roosted in the books. Once Junie had pulled out a dictionary only to discover a colony of hibernating bees. She'd swept them gingerly into a ball jar and carried them outside. As she tried to shake them into the dumpster, they woke up one by one and covered her arm in bright red welts. The kettle hissed and started to wail. Junie tried to pull away from her sister's grasp, but Hazel held fast. The police get the news, Hazel whispered. This place is probably bugged. I should have thought of that. Okay, why don't you hide here, Junie said. Treat her like an elderly dementia patient, she decided. She'd stick Hazel in the back someplace, but not the beer cooler because she'd left the laptop out. The kettle was screaming now, and Junie finally loosened Hazel's hold on her wrist. You wait here, I'll get the tea, and I wish we could still make pizza, Hazel said abruptly, brushing past Junie to yank open the oven, which was filled with romance novels, their shiny covers faded with age. Maybe she wasn't afraid after all. Maybe she'd forget all this talk of police and sirens. I can't believe you like these, Hazel called out. Junie pulled off the kettle. The steam made her cheeks flush. I don't like them. I think they're funny, she said. In reality, she skimmed them all for the sexy parts. The Regency counts and heiresses, the medieval knights and scullery maids, and the newer ones that featured uptight career women and rogue artists. The man and woman hated each other at first. The woman was hurting from some terrible former relationship. They were drawn to each other until their passion consumed them and they had mind-blowing sex. They fought, they made up, they got married, and they had plenty of money. Junie poured tea into blue camping mugs and circled back toward her sister, but Hazel was gone. Or, more specifically, she was heading down the steps into the lower half of the store, rounding the corner toward the beer cooler. Not in there, Junie yelled. She set the tea carefully in the middle of the front seating area so it wouldn't burn, and followed. The toe of her sneaker caught on the loose nail in the step, and she stumbled forward, however, wrenching her ankle and knocking over a pile of feminist hermeneutics texts. The swirl of dust made her gag. By the time Junie made it into the cooler, limping, her sister had already clambered straight into the back corner. Hazel was curled into a ball, arms wrapped around her knees. She'd somehow settled into Junie's exact spot and was staring at Junie's laptop as if it were a dead animal. That's not mine, Junie started to say, and the expression on Hazel's face stopped her. Her sister was afraid again. Bad trip, afraid. She approached carefully, squatting to fit beside Hazel and beneath a sloping wall. She was about to try and explain when one of the cooler doors popped open with a dusty hiss. The current of warm air alerted her. She froze, fingers hovering above Hazel's forearm, and tried not to breathe. Hazel tipped forward, eyes wide, before they slammed shut. "This place is filthy," an unfamiliar man said. His voice was hoarse, amused. "Must have been a beer cooler," another voice said, younger, female. This voice Junie knew but couldn't place. "Too bad they got rid of the old merchandise," the man said. Hazel sucked in a breath. Junie reached over to clap a hand over her sister's mouth. "No one's here," the woman said. "That hot tea says otherwise," the man said. "We can wait." The cooler door shut. Junie exhaled in a slow, steady stream. She'd have to slip out and pretend she'd been stalking in the back. They wouldn't know there was never any need to stalk anything. "Stay here," she commanded Hazel. "Do not move." Thanks.